Thanks everybody for coming to Pure Land of Iowa this afternoon. So today I wanted to share with you a teaching from Soto Zen that's fairly unique to Soto Zen. It's called Daishu Ichi Nyo. So Daishu, Dai is for great or big. That's my name, Daishin, the same Chinese character as the Dai. Shu, Daishu. Shu means the assembly. And it could be referring to the community that gathers together. So the great community or the assembly of practitioners. Ichi means one, and Nyo is kind of a sense of, well, we put the two together, Ichi Nyo, and my understanding is that it means something like practicing together as one body. So this is a really important practice in Soto Zen. I think even more important than whatever state of mind that you may be having at the moment. So let me go into that a little bit. I'd like to share with you, this gives you a sense of what it's about. So this is from Dogen's Pure Standards for the Zen Community. Keep in mind that Dogen is from the 13th century, so we're talking about maybe 700-800 years ago that he wrote this, and it was for mainly a audience of home leavers, people who were living at a temple for their whole life, 24 hours a day, practicing together. And so this was his recommendations. This is the way that they practiced together, not only when they were doing meditation, but also when they weren't doing meditation. And so it was a way of living in harmony with others. And I feel there's a lot to be learned from this if we can just get to the spirit of it. So he says here, just read about a paragraph. All Buddhas and all ancestors are within the way. So the way is referring to the Buddha way. If you're practicing, you're in the Buddha way. I remember, I'll have to share a story. I thought, when I first started sitting, that I had to do something correct, or I had to be doing it correctly in order to be on the right path. And that was a real issue for me. Thinking I don't have this right. And my teacher said something where I can't remember exactly her words, but it's similar to what Dogen says here. He says, all Buddhas and all ancestors are within the way and engage it. Without the way, they would not engage it. To be within the way, simply practicing, is being in the way, in the Buddha way. That is the Buddha way, simply practicing. So there's no special attainment that you have to have, mental or physical attainment that you need to have in order to be in the Buddha way. It's simply practicing. So what is that? What does he mean when he says practice? So what are the concrete aspects of practice? The Dharma exists and they appear. And it's talking about the Buddhas and ancestors. Without the Dharma, they do not appear. Therefore, and here's the concrete stuff of practice. When the assembly is sitting, sit together with them. As the assembly gradually lies down in order to go to sleep for the evening, lie down also. This is huge. I don't know if we can get just by reading it, we may not get the import of this, but it's saying like when you're, whatever activity that you're involved in, know what everybody else is doing. So this is an awareness practice that goes beyond just our own mental state. It's having an awareness of, well, where is everybody else? That will inform our practice. It's kind of like when I make dinner and I want to eat with my family. I don't want to make dinner make dinner for everybody, but then I'm only the only one sitting around at the table, right? Uh, I want my family to be with me at the table. And I'm sure you've had this experience too, where you make dinner and your partner's not coming to the table when it's ready, when it's hot, when it's cooked, right? So this is kind of just saying, this is the way to keep peace in a community, is to do things together. So it also means to be able to drop what it is you're doing in the moment, to let it go, even if you're totally into it, to be able to let it go as a practice and to join in with what everybody else is doing in the moment. So that's a monastic kind of practice. It's a Soto Zen way of practicing together in a temple, when you're living in a temple with other people. But I think it's also applicable to our daily lives, and to a certain degree. We can keep it in mind as a way of navigating in our own life. Like we may wonder, what is it that I should be doing right now? And the question, the answer that Dogen poses is, look around and see what other people are doing, see what other people are needing, and then you'll know what to do. So the answer can come, the answer doesn't just come from within us, it comes from looking around as well. Inactivity and stillness, at one with the community. So that's the key there, at one with the community, whether you're still, whether you're in zazen, it's all sitting zazen together. It's another aspect of Soto Zen, is that we actually meditate together at the same time, in the same place. In some schools of Buddhism, there's an encouragement to go out and kind of sit by yourself. In fact, the Buddha talks about this: go to a quiet room or at the foot of a tree and sit down. And whether there's other people involved or not, that's not primary. But with Soto Zen, this is kind of the practice. There's not a separate time that you go out by yourself, unless you have kind of gotten to a certain level of maturity and are kind of know what you're doing. And so this is a way to work on our ego, because there's a resistance, I think, in all of us, especially in the West, to doing things together as a community, as a group. There's a kind of resistance. And it's one of the things that we can really learn from the Japanese, is that they're very communally oriented. I'll never forget, this is not just in a monastery. And I don't mean to suggest that we should all become, totally drop our individualism. That's not realistic either. But I'll tell you the extent of the sense of community in Japan, and it's not just in a monastery, and it's not in Buddhist life, but just in general life. When I was 22 years old, I went to teach English for a year in Japan, and I remember at the beginning of that year, a teacher came to me and showed me a photo of all of the other teachers in the school. So this was a junior high school. There was about 30 teachers, and she showed me this photo. And she said, "This is all of the teachers in our school when we went on vacation together." So that's the extent to which you are a part of a community. You work together. I think of the times that I've been a teacher in a school in the United States, and there is not that sense of community between teachers. And I'm sure that's the case outside of not just schools, but other work environments as well. There's a very loose kind of connection between each other, and our main focus may be where our community is, maybe our family to a large extent, our blood family, and much lesser extent the people in our work environment or even in our neighborhood. It's just the way that we think. It's not right or wrong, but keep in mind there's other ways of thinking. and being. So he continues, standing out has no benefit. Being different from others is not our conduct. That again is another really big difference here. So our practice is not to here's a thing with meditation. Sometimes we get this idea that if we have some kind of a deep understanding or deep experience, that will kind of propel us upwards. We'll have something over other people. We might get a sense of I'm better, or we might have a sense of I'm worse than. And what Dogen's saying here is just kind of evens the playing field. It's saying, not to stand out. It doesn't matter how deep your realization is. That's not what's primary. But can you work as one with the community and not stand out? That's ego. That's the dissolution of ego, and that's what the goal of Soto Zen is to let go of ego. I'll tell you another story. My teacher, when she was first meeting the teacher that was to give her Shukei Tokoro, the home leaving ceremony, where you first shave your head, her teacher. It was actually given to her by her root teacher's teacher. So his name is Daishu Shimbi Daosho. He's now deceased, and she knew that he would be doing the ceremony for her, and she had not met him yet. So her root teacher, Noda Daito Roshi, invited all of these monks from other temples to come and be at his temple with him for the day, for a couple of days. I don't know how long, but his teacher Daishun Shimbi was mixed in with all of these other monks, and Daishun Shimbi had the most seniority of the other monks that were there. But when my teacher went to see if she could figure out which one, because she hadn't met him yet, which one was Daishun Shimbi, she couldn't tell which one it was. It wasn't immediately obvious to her. Oh, that's the teacher. They were all working together. They all had the same robes on. I mean, they had their work clothes on, but it was all the same. Their heads were all shaved. You couldn't tell who was a teacher and what rank that they had just by looking at them. And so that's another example. I mean, in other instances in Soto Zen, you can tell those. You can identify a teacher, but in this particular case, you could not identify who he was. That's another example of not standing out. Dogen says further, so being different from others is not our conduct. This is the Buddha's and ancestors' skin, flesh, bones, and marrow, and also one's own body and mind dropped off. Therefore, engaging the way is the practice enlightenment before the empty kalpa. So do not be concerned with your actualization. Don't be concerned with, so actualization has to do with, it's kind of like plugging a light into a wall. You have the light's there, but in order for it to work, it needs to be plugged into the wall. And then then light gets emitted. And the same thing is true for our practice. When we're practicing, it's like we're plugged into the wall and we light up. But Dogen says here, he says, don't be concerned with that. Don't be concerned with your actualization, getting plugged into the wall. That's not important. Which is, again, a lot of times we come to practice in order to plug ourselves into the wall and, here I am. This is it. And it may be it, but he says, don't concern yourself with that. It is the koan before judgments, so do not wait for great realization. So you don't have to wait. So our practice isn't to, we're not sitting on our cushion waiting for some kind of deep insight to come to us. That's different. That's a different kind of practice. So one way to, how do we bring this to, how is this relevant, I think, for our own lives? And I think the place where we find some relevance is that this temple life, this temple way of being, is uh, a reflection of the way our society is as a whole. And for example, we see this kind of idea in Japan where the nail that sticks out gets pounded down, right? That's kind of a way of thinking in Japan. Nobody to stick out. Nobody's ego put forward. And you see this on the societal level. You see it in the local level, in the temples. People go out of their way. When we were just in Japan in March, and people went out of their way for us to help us with taking care of Malcolm, our son. Doors were opening, and people would usher us to the front of the line. They know, oh, these are people with a small child. They need help. We're just going to do what we can. I remember and it wasn't just about children, but I had asked one person to heat up I had gotten this dinner at the equivalent of a 7-Eleven in Japan, and I didn't have it heated up. And I gave it to a hotel attendant. She took it. She took it immediately, got it to the microwave, and I saw her practically running to me to bring it back to me. I was like, oh my gosh. She put me to shame, my practice to shame. She was actually running to get, wanted me to have it as quickly as possible. You didn't. So, and this was just at a normal hotel, and that's the kind of treatment we got. Now if I lived there for a long period of time, maybe it would be different. But what happens on the macro level, on the big level, affects what happens in the micro level, and we see this in. I want to just share. So we can find the examples of this in other religions as well. Christianity. Here's a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. He says, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." So the Japanese have this idea really rooted in them. It's not even a religious thing. It's not even Buddhists can't necessarily just claim it. The Japanese embody it. They know that what happens to one person affects everybody else. I can't say that across the board, but in many contexts, you see that. It's pretty obvious. And that's why they say, okay, here's somebody with a child. It's going to make all of our lives a lot better if we help them out with that child and get them forward. They have that sense. And here we have it in our own religious tradition as well, Christianity. Islam has a saying in the Quran. I really like this saying. Taking one human life is taking the life of all humanity. So another sense of that when what happens to one affects everybody, and the Quran goes so far as to say it happens to everybody. This is also found in Buddhism. We see in the Avatam Saka Sutra, in one atom is the whole universe. So we're not individuals. We're not just like these isolated bubble individuals that what happens to us doesn't affect anybody. What we do doesn't affect everybody. What we do affects everybody. Quran, moreover, it says, saving one life is saving all of humanity. It's a beautiful saying. And even in science, there's scientific studies that have proven this. I recently heard about a study of that black women who experience racism are significantly at significantly higher risk for having asthma. So they're at higher risk for having asthma just simply being exposed to racism. And to address their illness, what is done is they're given an inhaler. So our society says, okay, this is an individual problem. Asthma is seen as an individual problem. But if racism is the cause, then it's actually showing the dysfunction of a society manifesting in one person or one group of people. On that, the dysfunction of a society also shows itself on the individual level. And so this Dr. Gabor Mate, guy I'm really a fan of, you should Google him. Have you heard of him? Yeah, he's great, isn't he? Yeah. Oh, man. He says, is the asthma of an American black woman an individual disease, or is it the dysfunction of an entire society? I mean, that's the question he asks. And he says, obviously, it's the latter. It's the dysfunction of an entire society. So we can't just look at the internal personal environment. We have to also understand the broader social and cultural environment too when looking at illness. Okay, so how do we, what's the relevance for us right now in this room as we're practicing during this retreat, and then also just beyond our retreat? So just a couple of things here. Seeing ourselves as one body and working that way. So when we're sitting, we're not just sitting as isolated individuals on our cushions, on our chairs, but we're sitting as a whole. This is a way that we can kind of link with each other, even if it's in silence, even if we're not speaking with each other. So it's kind of like a bee colony. The colony, or like a flock of birds. The bees are so interesting. And bees, ants, those kinds of insects, they get their instructions through their relationships with each other. There's no one that's a head. There might be a queen bee, but they're not the head. They each have their different role, and they simply are playing out their role. And they get their instructions based on their relationship with each of the other bees, each of the other ants that are with them. Or, the V formation of the geese, there's no head there. They take turns. There's the head goose flying in that V formation. But when the head goose gets tired, he or she steps back to the end of the line, and then the next group comes forward. The next head comes in. So it's learning to fly. My teacher would say, fly with the flock. That's what we're doing. That's Daishu Ichi Nyo, flying with the flock. When we'll have a little bit of opportunity to practice this afternoon when we have a little snack with each other. But Zen eating, also you can practice this while eating, where your awareness is not just of what you're eating, but also of where everybody else is with their eating. So neither eating too fast nor too slow. So where is everybody else in the eating process? Are you like really eating quickly and then you're done and everybody else is still eating? Or are you eating so slow but everybody's done, you're the last one? And so it's not that it's wrong to eat fast or slow, it's just that can indicate to us, that sense of speed can indicate to us, where are we in our relationship with each other? Are we really aware of what other people are doing? So it's to kind of heighten our awareness of that. I think this is practical when we leave this space as well. Where are we in relationship with others in our immediate surroundings? Okay. Zazen too. So last thing, not to exclude anyone from our practice. When we're sitting in meditation, we're making ourselves into what my teacher calls ABC, a bigger container. We're learning the ABCs. My teacher's name, Dai En, in fact, means big circle. And her practice was, her teacher said, your practice is to not exclude anyone or anything in your practice. That's a big assignment. And so her name, Big Circle, that's what that means, to include everybody. And we can do that too. It's an invitation. So this is a little bit about Daishu Ichi Nyo. Thank you.